keep on running. I keep on running. I keep on running. Running. Non-stop till they out of breath. Putting in about 1,000 reps. Addicted to the grind like a pound of meth. Schneider-Weiler, how I climb the best.
Hello and welcome to the Football Autobiography Show. I am your host, Josh Schneider-Weiler. It is such a joy to be with you all today. The Football Autobiography Show is focused on long-form interviews with football's most interesting players, coaches, agents, writers, and more. Our guest today is Paul Fletcher. His CV is about as long as a summer day on the North Pole, but I'll try to be brief. He was a player from 1968 to 1981, most notably for Burnley, and made 4 appearances for the England U23 national team, but his most notable accomplishments come off the field. He was CEO of Huddersfield Town, Bolton, and Burnley. At Huddersfield, he led the construction of the McAlpine Stadium, which won Building of the Year in 1995, and also constructed the Bolton's the Reebok Stadium. He was commercial director for the new Wembley Stadium and was managing director for Coventry when they were constructing the Ricoh Stadium. He has negotiated over £100 million in sponsorship agreements and negotiated 5 major multi-million-pound naming rights contracts. He was awarded a MBE for services to football in 2007, and he has also written the book, The 7 Golden Secrets of a Successful Stadium. He is the owner and founder of Stadi Arena, which I'd love to go into, but this intro is already getting quite long, and he consults on stadiums from India all the way to Brazil. He is currently the managing director at the University College of Football Business, and he is a self-proclaimed stadiologist. In this episode, he discusses how basketball and a clothesline helped him become a center forward, how he helped more than 50 players receive disability payments, why a Dale Carnegie book and course changed his life, being a naive client, the secrets of a successful stadium, his dream of Hamburger Stadiums, road trips on the after-dinner circuit, what he learned from the Coventry City stadium debacle, and one incredible story about a gift to his daughter. He's a great storyteller, and my oh my does he have a lot of great stories to tell. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did recording it. Without further ado, enjoy my conversation with the one and only Paul Fletcher. All right, I'm here with Paul Fletcher. It's a pleasure to be with you today. How you doing?
Josh, I'm good. Yeah, we're at UCFB in the Etihad Stadium, Manchester. So pretty good to be here.
Yeah, we're on in the squash center, which I didn't even know Manchester City had. It's pretty remarkable, the campus around here. You could get lost very easily.
You're in the middle of what they call Sport City, and since the Commonwealth Games many years ago, this has developed. This was a very poor, downcast part of Manchester that's been redeveloped, and now it's a fantastic site for sport.
Yeah, we're going to get into stadiums and development and all that good stuff a little bit later. But first, I want to get to have the audience learn a little bit about you. So, what does the word serendipity mean to you?
The serendipity is a word that's played a big part in my life. Serendipity simply means the chance discovery of something wonderful, and it happens to a lot of us very infrequently. And I used to have a mentor. I've always preferred to have worked with people who know an awful lot more than I do. So I appointed many years ago a guy called Tony Stevens, who was at the time was looking after David Beckham, looking after Alan Shearer, top footballers in the UK. And Tony Stevens. He's still a very good friend of mine. But he used to say that you can live your life for 70, 80 years, but you'll only have 3 life-changing moments. That's significant. So, sometimes this serendipity, I remember my life-changing moments, and often they don't happen by plan, they happen by accident. So that's what serendipity is.
Well, now that you brought it up, what are some of those life-changing moments that
Well,
you
let me
mentioned?
give you one. I was in a football gym playing five-a-side football. I was 15 years old, And I saw a young boy who was probably 14. He was 5'2" tall. I saw him leap up above a 6-foot player and head a ball, and it was just magical. He I can see the vivid image now of this young kid just springing up there, and I thought, I want to do that. Not for any other reason, I just thought it was just wonderful that he could head the ball like that. So for a professional footballer, I'm quite small, I'm only 5'9.5", but I taught myself to head a football. I would practice every night, and then slowly I got into playing professional, and then somebody spotted me and I became a centre forward. And that was my passport in football for 16 years. If I hadn't have seen that young guy, and if I didn't want to copy him, and if I didn't have the passion to practice and do it, and this is what happens to a lot of us in life, a little light bulb goes on and you see where your future lies. All you got to do then is just follow it and work hard and find out how to get there. So that was serendipity, and that's one of my life-changing moments.
And I read you had a very interesting way that you went about training to become an expert header of the ball. How did you train?
My parents, we lived in a council estate, and my mum had a washing line in the back garden where she used to hang the washing out, and I found that if I hung a ball on the washing line, and if I headed it perfectly, it was about 30 foot, it would go from one end of the washing line straight to the other. If I didn't head it perfectly correctly, then it would just spin around the washing line. So every night I would come home from school and I would just hang the ball up and I would practice over again. And this is what happens to many people. I was reading the autobiography of what's he called, the tennis player from America, Agassi.
Andre Agassi.
Andre Agassi. I was reading Open. I was reading, and that's what he did. He practiced and practiced and practiced and sometimes it drives you mad. But if you don't do that, you don't become that person. So practice is a great thing, and that's what I did. And I practiced heading the ball, and it became a passport for me into the world of football.
That's absolutely incredible. And when you mentioned, you're 15 at the time, and for a lot of people like me, I'm 27 years old. We don't know the days of football apprenticeships. Can you describe a little bit what that was like growing up and being a football apprentice?
Yeah, it was a tough time. I started to learn how violent the game was in those early days. There was about 8, 9, maybe 10 young football apprentices, and we all knew that the chances of one of us breaking through was remote. So we were all in competition with each other, and it was very physical, and we used to have some fist fights, and we didn't agree with each other, and because we were all in competition with each other, and it's only natural that it's not as though we were all the best of friends. So then you start to learn about competition and how you break through this competition, and are you going to be one of those who falls by the wayside because you're not prepared to physically get involved. And in those days, the football actually on the field was a physical game. You had to look after yourself actually on the field. I played centre forward, I played against a centre half. It was his job to hurt me. It was his job to try and hurt me so that I wouldn't manage to continue in the game. And it was my job to hurt him back. That's how it works. So as a young apprentice, it was a really, really tough time. And I very, very nearly didn't make it. I very, very nearly get what's called a free transfer, which is basically the sack. And I was within a week, and luckily the manager called me in and he said, we're going to give you a free transfer and your career is ended, basically. I was 16 and a half, nearly 17. And the next day he got sacked. And a new manager came in, and he more or less said, I'm going to turn you into a real centre forward, and I'm going to do this. So, that is serendipity. That's another bit of chance discovery. And you often wonder, what would my life have been like if I if that guy hadn't have got sacked and I had have been kicked out of the game and I hadn't got into football. So it was tough. Life was tough as an apprentice professional. I used to mow the pitch maybe twice a week. That was my job. Painting the goalposts and painting all the fences. And as young apprentices, that's what we had to do in those days. These days, they get wrapped in cotton wool, but that's what it was like in my day.
And do you think that, I'm not saying that it should be brought back, but do you think that there should be some element of apprenticeship that young players should have now?
Well, not really. It's so different now. You see, the pool that my club, Bolton Wanderers, had to pick, the pool was maybe 30 miles around Bolton. That's where everyone came from. They came from Liverpool and from Everton, and some would come from Wigan and towns like that, around the Manchester-Bolton area. If you look at Manchester United now, or even Bolton Wanderers now, the pool is the world. They're attracting people from Nigeria and Ethiopia and Poland and Moscow. And so the pool is totally different than in my era. But that's how things have changed through television and lots of other things that has made the football game change considerably.
Yeah, you mentioned before that it was, the center back is trying to, get really violent to knock you out of the game.
Absolutely.
And it was extremely violent back then.
Yeah.
I read that you had 4 broken noses in your career. And then particularly there was one interesting episode from in your game against Belgium when you were playing for England where you broke your nose. Can you kind of tell that the story of that day?
It's just a normal day. You don't think it's going to happen. You sort of weigh up the guy you're going to play against, and obviously in those days there were always big 6-foot bruisers who was going to give you a hard time. But just shortly into the game, I got a blow because when you jump up to head a ball, everyone can throw their arms around. He threw his arm into my face and he broke my nose. A broken nose is not a serious injury in football because it just causes a lot of blood. It looks a mess, but it's not like a pulled muscle or an injury to a knee or an ankle. So a broken nose is seen to be one of those things. But unfortunately, I was going on a cruise. This was the end of the season. I was going on the QE2 with the Burnley team, and I came off, and the doctor said, you'll have to get it straightened when you get home. So my nose was underneath my eye and it looked a real mess. But the club doctor with the under-23 wasn't prepared to try and straighten it for me. And I said, look, you've got to sort this out. I'm going, no, he said, I can't touch it. You need a surgeon to do it. So I got one of my teammates to straighten it for me in the toilets. We went into the toilets and he gave it a bash on one side and he put it it was nearly straight, so he straightened it enough. And once the doctor found out, he went wild. He went absolutely. And I said, look, I'm going on with my teammates. We're going around the Caribbean on the QE2 for 3 weeks.
Yeah, you don't want to miss that.
I don't want to miss that. Even though I got 2 black eyes and a broken nose, I still want to go along. I'm certainly not going home having my nose straightened. So I let my teammate, who was a goalkeeper, straighten it for me.
Yeah, it must have hurt like hell though.
Well, not really. But, it's just it's a messy thing. A broken nose, a pulled muscle hurts, a twisted knee, a ligament, a cartilage. They hurt. A broken nose, and luckily, it's a depressed fracture of the nose where it's pushed down is a problem. But I got mine broke 2 to the left and 2 to the right, so it's reasonably straight now. So
you wouldn't know it now that you've had 4 broken noses.
Yeah. I had it reconstructed at the end of my career. So,
so as a smaller center forward against all these big bruisers that you mentioned, how did you kind of try to get your edge and deal with their physicality? Yeah,
my edge was quite simple. I was very good at timing. I fell in love with basketball when I was about 12, when I'd just gone to my new school. Basketball is and was a wonderful game, and I ended up playing for Langley. Now, the thing with basketball, in the end, to be a professional basketball player, unless you're 6'8" or 6'10" or whatever, you're not going to be a player. So I was never going to be a professional basketball player, but I loved to compete with tall players, and I learned to spring, and I learned my timing, and that is how I managed to get into the game. So often I would look at the centre half of the opposition we were playing against, and if he was 6'2", 6'3", that would suit me down to the ground, because I knew the moment I sprung up to head the ball, if I got my elbows out on his shoulders, if he started to jump, he would just lift me with him. So it had some advantages, and I never used to mind playing against someone taller than myself. In fact, the worst centre half I've played against was a guy called Dickie Rooks, and I remember him vividly. He used to play for Middlesbrough, and he was an inch shorter than I am. And I never headed a ball that day because he was doing to me what I was doing to the other one. So
that's incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, you remember these things. So you know, it was a different era. Football was different. It was totally different. It was violent because nobody was videoing or recording the game. If somebody did something that was quite violent, sometimes if the referee didn't see it, it wasn't a foul. The only thing that's a foul in those days was what the referee sees. If he didn't see anything, then it wasn't a foul. So it was a violent game where you had to look after yourself, and I quite enjoyed all that.
Yeah, fairly simple.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to ask, as a huge basketball fan, what type of basketball were they showing in England in the like 60s and 70s?
Oh yeah, no. This was nothing to do with television. This was playing it.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure if you would also.
Never
showed it.
You know, you're talking about a time where we had just got our first television at home, a black and white television. So this is a long time ago. You know, living on a council estate, and times were tough. I had a wonderful mum and dad. I was the only son, but still, you know, you didn't get basketball games from America. You was lucky.
Did they have courts near your estate, or?
No, we had courts at school. It was at school where the courts were, and this was a brand new school. And luckily, my sports teacher said he could see that I enjoyed football. He said, "You want to try for the basketball team?" He said, "You will enjoy basketball." And I adored it. I used to play every lunchtime if I could. I used to play every evening. I played for Lancashire, my county. But as I say, as I got older, and because I didn't grow taller, obviously the game stopped. A little bit like my granddaughter now. I've got a granddaughter now who adores playing netball.
Yeah.
But the only trouble is she's only 5'10", and she probably won't grow much taller. And she's playing sometimes against girls who are 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah.
You just can't compete. So, but I learned to compete on the basketball side.
There's something interesting when I was reading your autobiography that stuck out to me, which was not something I would have thought before. But it was all about how violent the game was, and you said, it was all about your disability pay and how you kind of championed a bunch of players getting, back pay for disabilities, for getting injuries. Can you kind of describe what inspired you to kind of champion, I think it was something like 60 cases of supporting former players, and how that came about? You mentioned in it, like, Tommy Smith, like, who was the destroyer for Liverpool, and how you tried to help him too.
Yeah, it was strange. At the end of football careers, the thing, even though it was a violent game, the club would always have a doctor and a surgeon, and it was all private. And if you got an injury, you went to the club doctor and the club surgeon, and they repaired your cartilage and repaired your broken leg or whatever. You never thought to go down the national health route. Now, many of the players, myself included, of my era, didn't realise that when we got an injury, when we broke our leg, when we even broke our nose in those days, we had what is classed in the UK as an industrial injury. It was an industrial injury, and there is compensation for industrial injury because you pay your national insurance. So I started to look into this, and I found that very, very few players, many of them who often had very bad injuries after their football career, had bad disabilities caused by the injury after the football game had never put in claims because they didn't realise that they were covered by national insurance. So myself and a guy called Jeff Nolte, who was an ex-Burnley player, we started to put in some applications and tried to see if there was any benefits to be had from sometimes players who were really, really struggling on the breadline. This was not to make any money for ourselves, but we just tried to test the system. And we found out that there was a way of applying, and industrial injury benefit was payable to under certain circumstances, and we knew what those circumstances were. So I went to see the PFA, Professional Footballers Association, Gordon Taylor, who's the chief executive of that, still there now. He used to be a player with me when I was a 15-year-old kid, so I knew Gordon. And Gordon said, well, would you mind representing this player and that player? And sometimes these were players who'd been international stars but had landed on hard times when they got to 35, 40 years old. And the worst injury I saw, I went up to Scotland representing one guy, and I said, what is the problem? He said, well, I can't go out to the house because of my ear. Why? Well, if I get a little gust of wind in my ear, I'm in bed in terrible state for 3 or 4 weeks. Well, how's that come about? He says, well, I was playing football, and when the opposition gets a free kick, you set up a wall. So I was in the wall, and it was Bobby. He said it was Bobby Charlton at Manchester United. He blasted the ball. As I turned my head, the ball hit me in my ear, and that wasn't the problem. But the ball must have had some fertiliser on it, and it went down inside my ear. And 4 or 5 years later, they found that this fertiliser had started to eat away at my scalp. Oh. And it had eaten away at nearly half of his scalp.
Oh,
and it was, God. Wait a minute, this is a wall in a game of football. And something had got down from the pitch, and it just been constantly eating away at him. And that was the only one it was the only case I lost. We couldn't get any compensation for him because there was no guidelines for something like that happening. Yeah. Breaking a leg or having a long-term problem, but having fertiliser down your ear is not something you could claim for.
Yeah, it's so extraordinary that.
Yeah. And he was in a terrible state. Just fancy not being able to walk out of the house after being a professional footballer for nearly 20 years. He was in a real state. So look at the professional footballers. There's some funds that we helped him with, but it was a sad story.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, and obviously these are the days before the Premier League, where players got paid well, but not astronomical amounts. So. It was much more important work back then that you were doing. It brings to actually how you retired, or what was the signal for your kind of the end of your playing career. I'm going to read a quote from the book, if that's okay with you. In some ways, ironically, the lucky footballer is the one who faces an injury towards the end of his career that gives him time off from the team while he recovers, that enables him to think about what he will do when the time comes to hang up his boots. Inactivity gives time for thought and planning. It's almost a rehearsal for the real thing when it comes. It happened to me. So can you kind of describe the process of retirement and how you faced it?
Yeah, it's you always know that you're going to retire at some stage, but you never quite know when. Every player thinks they're going to play till they're 35, 40 years old, and it doesn't work like that, and it always comes most expected. So the best way to retire is, like I've said there, if you're still on a contract and you get an injury, they still have to pay you. So I got an injury that I was never going to play again. In fact, I did play. I played one game. They said to me, "You'll never play again," and I said, "I will." And they said, "You won't." And I played one game, and then after that game I retired because I didn't want to damage it even further. But so that was just my stupidity. But I knew that during my time I was in plaster, I was in hospital, I thought, I'm going to have to do something now. And one of the main things I decided to do was I had a few demons and a few things that scared me. And I thought I will challenge my demons. And one of them was speaking up in public. I was petrified about speaking in public. And often I was asked to be, would you come as guest speaker at the golf club because you're a Burnley centre forward? No. Will you come to the school and give prizes out to the 6-year-old kids? No. Will you say a few words? No. I would always shy away. And then once again, these life-changing moments. I remember going to a Dale Carnegie course, and on week number 8, the guy suddenly, boom, light bulb went on. He started to say, where do life's opportunities lie? Inside of your comfort zone or outside of your comfort zone? And I thought, where do life's opportunities? Now, I was living inside a comfort zone. I was a professional footballer. I was being very well paid. I was very comfortable. I had no need to speak at golf clubs and stuff like that. So I decided, as I was driving home that night, if anybody ever asked me to speak publicly again, I would never, ever refuse it, irrespective of what the event was. And I haven't to this day. And I've been an after-dinner speaker for the last 30 years. I've spoken all around the country, golf clubs, cricket clubs, football clubs. I've been live on TV. I speak on cruises. I do motive. And it was all because I think I had the guts to challenge my fear of public speaking. And it's amazing once you do get out of your comfort zone. And that, when he was called Brendan Fitzmaurice, who was doing the Dale Carnegie, when Brendan Fitzmaurice said those few words, where do opportunities lie, inside your comfort zone or outside, that really switched the light on for me. And I knew I had to get outside. And so that's just one of the things in my life that's, and not only apart from earning money as well, speaking on some of the people that I've met, some of the characters, some of the comedians, some of the other speakers, some of people I've met, as I say, on these cruises, and I've spoken in 15, 16 different countries. It's just a great thrill to go out there, all because I challenged one of my fears.
Well, I mean, you knew of the book though before that, right? I mean, the infamous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, you had seen the book previously.
Oh yeah. I'd read the book, but sometimes you need something re-emphasizing, don't you? You need some. The reason I went on a Dale Carnegie course, which lasted about 16 weeks, I think every Wednesday for 16 weeks, something like that, was to re-emphasize. And sometimes a book you've got to go over and over again. But a little light bulb goes on occasions, and it happened as I say, just one night. Even though I'd read the book, once somebody said it, and I thought, he's talking about me. He's not talking about anybody else in the room. He's talking about me, and I'm living in a comfort zone, which was fine when I'm a professional footballer, earning quite a lot of money. It isn't fine now. I've got 2 kids, I've got a wife, I've got a mortgage. I've got to get out of my comfort zone. And then things started to grow from then on.
And so how did you kind of, that was at the end of your playing career. And so how did you transition from player to businessman? Yeah,
well, I made a conscious decision that I didn't want to start halfway up the ladder. Even though I had some notoriety in the area and people would recognise me, and I'd been an ex-player then, I didn't want to play on the back of that. So I thought I will start right at the bottom of the ladder and try to climb up it. And that's exactly what I did. Rather than go into football at a certain level, I went into football right at the very bottom, non-league. We used to get 400 people, and I took the commercial manager's job at a non-league football club. So one minute I'm a top professional footballer, next minute I'm in commercial. But did I learn how to become a commercial manager? I was selling dinners, sportsmen's dinners that I would organise. I was selling lottery tickets. I was golden goal on Saturday. All these things that when I started to climb the ladder of football, they came in very handy for me. So, I advise, in fact, a lot of our students here at UCFB, don't think you want to start at Manchester United or Chelsea or the top clubs. Start at a non-league football club and learn how the industry works, and then it's a lot easier. So that's what I did. I started at the bottom and slowly made my way up from different club to different club.
Yeah, so like you can make your mistakes at the small placers, and you have more freedom to try different things.
Absolutely, that's where you learn. You learn at the basement level, and I was trying to do sponsorship deals for I don't know £4,000 or £5,000, which was a lot of money in non-league football. Then a few years later, I'm doing naming rights deals for £10 million. And the principles are still the same. You still have to turn up on time to the meeting, be pleasant and give a good presentation. The principles are exactly the same. It's just the notes on the end of the check are a lot different.
Yeah, you mentioned, so you were at, at this non-league club.
Colne Dynamos, it was called, yeah.
And then you make it to Huddersfield.
Yeah.
Right after that, can you? I mean, even though you had made and learned a lot of the mistakes at Colne, did you ever feel like you were over your head at any point at Huddersfield when you made that jump?
No, not at all. No, I didn't feel, and I've never felt that because what I learned to be, I like to be, I think you have choices in life. You can either learn to be a top academic and keep studying academia, or you can follow the Dale Carnegie route and want to be a person. I'm a person. What I like to be is honourable, is loyal, I like to work in a team. I like to pat people on the back. I love a fun environment. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but this is what suited me. And I knew if I brought these principles, as I'd learned from the book, into my career after football, it would put me in good stead. And it has done. Yeah. And I've never regretted that. So I didn't know a lot about the football industry because I'd been a player, but I started to learn. About how the car park works, how catering works, how the groundsman marks out the pitch, how the grass grows, how the floodlights. I started to learn about all these things, and Huddersfield was the first one. But I took the Huddersfield job on condition I wanted nothing to do with the new stadium. Huddersfield had been talking about a new stadium at Huddersfield for about 5 years, and the previous commercial manager he almost got fed up of it, and he said, "Whatever you do, Fletch, don't forget about that new stadium." So I took the job on condition I wanted nothing to do with the new stadium. A new chairman came on board after 12 months. He got him into the boardroom. He said, "Paul, your job is to build us a new stadium." And I went, "Oh no, I know nothing about it." He said, "Well, it's a good place to start." And that's where I started to piece together the McAlpine Stadium at Huddersfield. I had no experience, I knew nothing about stadia, but I was prepared to learn, and there was an opportunity there for me.
Yeah, no, because I've read it interesting in your book. You outline, well, at least for me, it was very powerful because you outline this scene where you're in the boardroom and with like the architect and all the structural engineer, the surveyor, all these important people, and I forget if it's the architect. One of them like came over to you and said you're really not being naive right now. You don't really know what you're doing.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. It was the architect.
Yeah, and
he was in charge, and I was being critical or trying to find out were this extra. I think the figure was about £1.5 million. The price of the project had just raised by £1.5 million. That is a serious figure, and it was in those days. And I had got all the professional team there, and it was a team meeting, and I was having a real argument with the architect, and he suddenly said, "Listen, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a naive client." I went, "What? Sorry?" He said, "You're a naive client." I know what the word naive means, but I said, "What do you mean a naive client?" He said, "Well, you've never built one of these buildings before, have you?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you're a naive client." And then he went sort of quiet because he'd let the cat out of the bag. And I looked around the room and everybody was looking at me and I'd never done one before. And he was exactly right. I didn't know the cost of seating or how floodlights work, how pitches work. So I think, I don't know if I mentioned it in the book. When I drove home that night, I thought, he's absolutely right. I am a naive client. I will have to find an extra £1.5 million. Because there will be some contract somewhere, which means because these guys have been building these buildings before and I've not, But I'll tell you what, I'm never going to be a naive client again. So obviously the next time I put the stadium, and the next time you learn a little bit more of how to piece these things together. But it was, this professional team, as they call them, architects, project managers, structural engineers, they've been sending my wife flowers and telling me how wonderful I was just to get the job. And then once they get the job, they turn and they're a little bit different. And their attitude is a little bit different. So,
they become the stone cold businessman.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's life. That's life. But, that's another lesson you learn. Bunches of flowers are great, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a great relationship.
Yeah, and now you've written an entire book about stadiums called "The 7 Golden Secrets of a Successful Stadium." I mean, so obviously you've learned quite a deal, and I want to get into some of that stuff right now. One of the things that really stands out is your belief that a stadium needs to be in operation for 5 or ideally 7 days a week. And I mean, I know in the United States where I grew up, that's not the case at all. And I mean, a lot of people like myself really detest, when governments want to give subsidies or, tax breaks for these stadiums, or, give publicly funded dollars to these stadiums. Because most of them don't do it 5 to 7 days a week. And so my question to you is, how can clubs, or how can stadiums be operational for 5 or ideally 7 days a week?
Well, they can, but there has to be an appetite by the owners to want them to be operational 7 days a week. Now, unfortunately, I'll be a little bit critical now. The people who generally build these stadiums are naive clients. They are complete amateurs. Often, very few people have had the journey I've had. I have been responsible for building 4 stadiums from beginning to end, and I've also consulted on maybe 20 or 30 more. So I have a knowledge of how these buildings work. What I find at most football clubs, there'll be 2 directors. One of them will have been a butcher. The other one will have been a car salesman. They've both become very wealthy. They bought themselves shares in the football club, and suddenly they're given the job of building a stadium. They piece a stadium together, and then once it's built, they stay there as directors of that club, and the knowledge doesn't leave it. So it isn't shared with anyone. They never build another one or another one or another one. So consequently, they are sometimes courted by architects who show them pretty pictures, and really all they're thinking about is football on match days. When I see a stadium, I want to know what it's doing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, what it's doing through the night. Does it have hotel bedrooms that convert to executive boxes? There's lots and lots of these, but unfortunately, it's my view that architects, the professional team, know that they're dealing with naive clients.
Yeah, so they seduce them, kind of.
They seduce them with pretty pictures,
yeah.
And they say, just look at, and they go, oh, look at the old stadium, and look at this new stadium. Doesn't that look fantastic? And I say, I don't care whether it looks fantastic, I care more, is it a safe stadium? But you've got some pretty pictures there, and they think, well, if we can deliver this for our fans, then so, and then what they do, and I've seen this. It happened at the McAlpine. The new stadium gets built, many millions. It opens on match day, and then the board sit at the first board meeting and they go, "What shall we do with it now?" No, you decide that before you build it. You don't do that afterwards. You design all these extra facilities in. You don't do it afterwards. So I am pretty passionate about that. And there's a great stadium that's just been constructed in India. It's my belief now that football pitches need to be lifted 7 metres. The actual pitch itself, it needs to go up 7 metres.
Can you explain that? When you say the pitch moved up 7 meters, why? Can you explain why that is?
Very, very simply, because it gives you 500,000 square feet of space underneath the pitch. Right, so you've got a car park there. You can wrap shops around the outside. You can wrap retail around the outside. You can build in classrooms. You can put in all these facilities, and the only problem it causes is that spectators have to walk up 18 steps. That's the only difference. But by lifting the pitch up, then a football pitch is, remember this, it's a good one for you, Josh, it's 2 acres.
Okay.
A football pitch is, that's the exact size of a football pitch, is 2 acres. By lifting it up, you're using 2 acres of space that you couldn't normally use. Now, I was having this conversation to this Indian friend of mine 7-8 years ago, and I saw him writing a few notes. He's done exactly that in India. Well, there's no space in India. He's lifted. Not only has he lifted the pitch up to 7 metres, he's also put 2 levels below. So he's got 4 levels before you get to pitch level, and he's got tennis courts. He's got snooker halls, cards, casinos. He's got everything built into this facility, and the pitch, nobody notices is that it's lifted 7 metres.
Okay, yeah. So, because at first when you told me this, I was like confused. I was thinking like, so the fans are down here, and then looking up. Okay, yeah. So everything's
everything lifts up,
elevated.
Yeah. And one thing in the UK you can put underneath, which works perfectly well, is a retail store. Asda, Tesco's would go very well, sit very, very nicely, and then you can multi-use the car park. And everybody says, oh, yeah, but how can you get served when there's a football match on? Football matches 26 times a year. Yeah. And all that would happen, people wouldn't go shopping.
For 4 hours.
For 4 hours, 26 times a year.
Yeah.
And they go, they look at the watch, they say, it's 2:30, there's a football game on, it's Saturday afternoon, let's go at
Plus, they'll be probably going to the game.
Yeah, they'll be going to the game because they're nearby. And then you got the multi-use of the car park, you got the multi-use of the stadium. The cost of putting a retail store underneath a stadium is exactly the same as building it alongside it. So this guy, this friend of mine in India, he's done all these things, and that's one of the things he's done at this Ahmedabad stadium.
Yeah, well, I know I read that you had your company Stadi Arena has this radical concept of like kind of cutting off half of the stadium into making it like a place for like concerts, and it really struck home with me because I went to this school in New York called Syracuse University. And they have their basketball games in the football arena. It's the only one in the States that does it, and they cut off half the stadium to do just that. But it's weird because you can still see the other half. Yeah. And so it's not done the way that Stadi Arena does it, and so it seems like it would be a worthwhile venture. So I mean, anything. Wait, this is a long way of saying like I actually have experience with what you're doing, except just not with the exact way that you guys have done it.
Well, you see, the thing we have to preserve over here is the pitch. You can't use the pitch, so we got to get off the pitch. So we can use a stand that's behind one of the goals, and after a game, a door closes at the front, hurricane-proof doors that have been around for 25 years, and so we cause one stand, because these are open-roofed stadiums, to be converted into an arena, and it just takes about 8 minutes. It's just such a logical thing to do. It isn't very expensive. And I had this idea when I was writing out a cheque for about, I don't know how many thousands of pounds it was, when we had Brian Adams at I thought, why am I writing a cheque out, hiring in seats for our exhibition hall at Coventry, when I have 32,000 seats out there in the stadium? Surely we should be able to convert one space for Brian Adams to stand up and perform in front of 5,000 people. So that's how it came about.
And the infrastructure's already there,
that's right. Yeah, toilets are already there, food's already there, concessions, everything's already there. Ticketing's already there, car parking's already there. Unfortunately, I had this great idea when every stadium had been built in the UK, and so there's not a great market for it in the UK. Anyway, we've done the first one in India, and we're looking at one in Philadelphia, and we're looking at other places around the world.
I want to get back to your book, actually, this is. You said that you were asked 10 aspects of your favorite stadium, and I'm going to just read a couple to intro some questions. One was commercially successful building that allows a football club to attract external investment. Number two, an iconic building where every square foot of usable space has carefully designed to sweat commercially. And then one of the other ones you had was Old Trafford. So I want to take those one by one. So how do clubs build a commercially successful building that allows a football club to attract external investment? And what elements are really vital, and what are clubs like missing when they design these stadiums and don't attract enough investment?
Yeah, it's very complex, but there's another way of looking at this. If you look at new stadiums now, normally a lot of new stadiums in the UK, the people who built them have gone bankrupt because they built new stadiums, and new owners have come in to move the club forward. Look at Leicester City. When they built their new Walker Stadium, this was to keep them in the Premiership. So I remember having a meeting with Leicester City, and they said, we're going to build a new stadium. We've been in the top half of the Premiership for many years, and we want to compete with Liverpool, Everton, Tottenham, Chelsea. And they built a new stadium, and they went down 2 divisions. Not only did they go 2 divisions, they went into administration. So then new owners come along with a brand new stadium and start to invest in the team. So it isn't them that have funded the new stadium, this is the new owners. So that is sometimes what happens. But also I think we've got to look at the commerciality of these buildings. There are a lot of ways to make these buildings work, and even introducing a university, introducing education. I would love to see, we've designed this thing that we call now the Hamburger Stadium. If you look at a hamburger, the bun at the bottom would be retail shops lifting the pitch up. The meat in the middle of the hamburger would be the football or the rugby that's played there. And then I'd love to see a university designed into a stadium and have students actually living in the building. Just imagine that. Imagine you've got 400 or 500 bedrooms, student bedrooms there, all overlooking the pitch, where students could live in that football building.
Sign me up now.
Well, exactly. And why wouldn't you want to live? And then just wait a minute, and then you have a job. When there's a game on Saturday, you actually have a job working, which will help with pay through your time at university. And then on the retail, you have a walk round, and there's a Starbucks, and there's a travel agents, and the hairdresser's shop, because you've got retail wrapped all the way around the box. So you've got this Hamburger Stadium where the meat, which is the sport, is played in the middle. You've got student accommodation and a university in the top, and a hotel in the top there. So why is that not possible?
Yeah, I mean, what it sounds like, and I never really kind of put 2 and 2 together, but I used to live in Korea, and when you're there, like, these buildings are just like little mini cities. And, one floor you got the hairdresser, and the next floor you have a doctor's office. The next floor, I mean, even you have a lot of times multiple things on these floors. Then you got a bowling alley, and then like an arcade, and you have like I used to work in like a school academy on a floor, and then so you have these little mini cities, and it sounds like what you're suggesting is kind of the same thing as like this little mini complex within a stadium.
Yeah, it's very complex. Saying complex is a strange word, but in the UK, most of our stadiums, the history of them, they started off almost with the Industrial Revolution, where a football team started on the edge of town. It started off on the edge of town, and as the town's grown, the football club hasn't moved. Old Trafford, Manchester, 100 years ago, it's still there, and that's how it started, and it's evolved, and it's got bigger and better as the town or Manchester has got bigger and better, and other clubs, Man City, has also developed as well. But the thing about football stadia, unfortunately, is, if you move them out of town, I don't think the ones out of town work. I think they need to be on the edge of the town centre. Burnley Park was on the edge of Bolton's town centre. Move it 6 miles away, and Bolton Wanderers are struggling to get the fans there on a regular basis. even the average gate in the Premiership was not capacity, and they were in the Premiership for about 11 years, I think. So moving out of town, I don't think is the answer. I think these buildings need to be part of the community, but they mustn't just be football buildings. There's lots of other facilities you can put in there that makes them a community building, and then on Saturday it's a place to go to watch sport.
You mentioned Old Trafford, and when I was listing some of your 10 aspects of a favorite stadium, you just listed that as one of the reasons. So what is it about Old Trafford? Obviously, you just mentioned the location that you appreciate so much as a stadium. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. To me, the most important part of a stadium is inside, not outside. I don't really care what it looks like outside. And sometimes you see drawings or you see architectural plans of these stadiums, and all you see is a view from a mile away, a mile up in the air, and it shows this aerial view, and it shows all these curvatures, and so you've got an architect just playing around with the buildings. Football fans don't care about that. If I were to ask 100 Manchester United fans to draw me what they think Old Trafford looks like, I don't think they'd be able to do it. They draw what it looks like on the inside, because that's what's important. So it's what goes on the inside that matters. To win awards for a building that looks like a Christmas cake, for me, is not what football's about. Now, there is a big change. I do understand that in the early days of the Old Traffords, stadiums were built to get people in. Now, stadiums are built and designed to get people out. Should there be an emergency, you've got to get people out quick. So I understand all that. But it is possible to design it inside. Like, you look at the Olympic Stadium now. That was designed for Olympics. It wasn't designed for football. And the fans are sat 30, 40 metres away from the action, and I don't think they like it.
Yeah, I mean, ask West Ham fans. I know they don't like it.
They hate it. And I had the privilege and pleasure of playing at Upton Park, and I remember you'd take a throw in and you'd go off the pitch to pick up the ball, and people would be grabbing you and they'd be pulling you, and there'd be a lot of obscenities thrown at you. It was great fun. That was fun. It was great. It was being part of. Imagine now those same people wanting to watch their team being sat 30 metres away. So. The great thing about UK stadiums is that the majority of them are owned by the club. They're not owned by the local authority, because that's what local authorities do. They put running tracks around and they say, oh, don't worry, like it or lump it if you're a fan. No, that doesn't work in football.
Yeah. You mentioned local authorities. You worked with Coventry City and had a somewhat, it seemed like a debacle from reading about how you built the stadium there. Can you kind of chronicle that experience, what it was like, and then what you took away from it?
Yeah, on my very first day at Coventry, I had been appointed by not Coventry City Football Club, but sort of a project company that was the company that was going to deliver this new stadium project, and it was set up by it was owned by the football club, but it wasn't the football club. So on the first day, I was asked or summoned to go and see the local authority, and the questions that they asked me that day was very, very deep, and I could sense that day they didn't have great affection for the football club. So this is on day one. Now, over the next 6 years, we managed to build the Ricoh Arena, and lo and behold, the council of Coventry have decided to sell that arena to a rugby club. Wait a minute, no, this was built to keep Coventry City in the Premiership. This is what it was built for. The whole reason for having a new stadium was to keep Coventry City in the Premiership. Why would you sell that to a rugby club from... It was just ludicrous. So right the way through, there was a running battle I was in the middle of it all. We had a running battle between the football club and the local authority. And the local authority have won. They've won the battle. But what has it got them? Their name, Coventry, instead of being beamed around the world, 260 countries, I believe the Premiership goes to. Instead of being a Premiership club, beamed around the world alongside Manchester United and Chelsea and Everton and Liverpool. The word Coventry is now associated with Rochdale, Scunthorpe, some of the lower, because they're in the lower divisions, and the football club will never ever be able to get back into that Premiership unless it owns its own stadium. It has to, because it's competing. There's been some private investors who've bought it, and I think they've had the fingers burned. I can't see anybody making any money out of that. But surely the football club has to own its own stadium.
So what did you learn from that experience, that kind of debacle of what happened there? What did you take away for your future projects?
I took away quite a lot of sadness for the people of Coventry, because I think Coventry is a great city, and I'd like to see it alongside other great cities. And unfortunately, because its football club has slipped down. What did I learn from that debacle? The football club has to be independent. It has to be in charge of its own destiny. If it wants to go out and borrow £50 million to buy a £50 million player, it has to be able to do that and take that risk, because that decision might get the club into the top of the Premiership. You can't have an involvement with a local authority who are looking after taxpayers' money. So the message is, don't go into partnership with your local authority.
So there's a lot of clubs right now that are thinking, or that have been thinking, like, do we build a new stadium or do we renovate our current stadium? Liverpool famously wanted to, for a while, build the stadium. Then they, in the end, renovated. They just built a new stand, and it looks like they're going to do more changes. And then Chelsea, very similar as well. They're, thinking about building a new stadium. Tottenham now just decided to build a new stadium. What is the thought process of renovating a stadium versus building a new one? Because a lot of fans, it builds a lot of angst for fans. These things have been institutions for 100 years or more, and such fond memories. So from the other side, from the fans' perspective, people in the boardroom, what are their thoughts? What are they thinking?
Every football club is different. Every football club has evolved over the last 100 years or so, and the only relationship they have with other football clubs is competitors. There isn't a lot of information that's shared. Now, some football clubs have good opportunities to develop on the same site. Like Manchester United, we've chatted about that. It's got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because it was built on a footprint. Maybe the people who built it could see in the future there will be an 85,000-seater stadium here one day. Maybe someone had that vision when they first started it off. But obviously there are some places, like at Chelsea, they have to move because they can't develop Stamford Bridge anymore. The thumb rule seems to be about 1.5 miles is a distance that fans will move. Once you start to move 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles away from, like we did at Bolton, moved from Burnley Park up to the Reebok Stadium. It was too far away, I thought. So that's... Every single one is different. There was an interesting slide that someone showed me a number of years ago, and it was at 2008, and it just showed the two divisions, the Premiership, and it showed the Championship, and it showed some clubs that were in red, and all the clubs in red were at the bottom of the division, and they were the clubs that had built themselves a new stadium. And they were right at the bottom of the division, and some of them got relegated. So, if you follow that model, that means new stadium, go to the bottom of the division when you're trying to get to the top of the division. So sometimes clubs can't afford to build these new stadiums, but now it's starting to get different. That we have this. When Burnley got into the Premiership for the first time, it was worth about 60 million to them. Now it's worth 220 million. The Premiership is now massive. So it is right that the Tottenhams of this world, the Chelseas are building these fantastic new stadiums. They've got multi-millionaire owners, and probably they realise that the next phase of football will be world football. It'll be a world league. You won't play, Bolton Wanderers won't play against Blackburn and Burnley. Bolton Wanderers, if it's in the Premiership, will be playing against teams in Moscow and Azerbaijan and all around the world. The world is a smaller place. A world league is going to be the next, believe me.
So the smaller clubs that you just mentioned, I mean, not the Burnleys even, but like, the Boltons, the teams in the second division or even at the bottom of the first division, does it really make sense for them to build these new stadiums? If you're saying that they're getting relegated, or they're the ones at the bottom.
Yeah, well, they're going to find it tough. Professor Chris Brady did a lovely report, and he projected in it that within 10 years, it's going to be the city clubs that are at the top of the table, and the Bolton, Burnleys, Blackburns will go to the bottom quite naturally. You see, there's something else that's come into football that a lot of people haven't noticed, but it's significant. Football tourism. When Manchester United play, say, Bournemouth, they'll drive down there and all the fans will go down there, and that night all the fans will drive home. When Man United play Barcelona, 10,000 fans will go to Barcelona, and they won't just watch the match, they'll take in the city for the next 2 or 3 days. Yeah. So you've got a tourism, and they'll come back 4 days later and say, wasn't that a great trip? Now, with great respect, if Barcelona came over to Burnley or Bolton, the people from Barcelona wouldn't spend 3 or 4 days looking around Burnley. They would go to London, they would go to Manchester, they would go to Birmingham, to these big cities. So they're suggesting the big city clubs, when football does move more into Europe, it'll be the big city clubs that will be attracted by football tourism.
Yeah,
that will start to.
I mean, I used to live in Madrid, and I noticed once when Bayern Leverkusen came to Madrid, and you'd see all the fans that day, and then the next day after, they were there for the week.
Stay around.
So I tend to agree.
You can follow that. Where the model used to be, drive down, watch the game, come home. Things have changed.
Speaking of cities, you worked commercially for the new Wembley Stadium, but before you resigned, and I'd just like to read a quote where you said, "The vision for the new Wembley was theirs, was not mine, and it was clear that they saw me as too docile for the harsh London environment or meetings that were all too confrontational and aggressive." So can you kind of just walk through how your vision for Wembley was different from the one that ended up?
Yeah, I joined a team. I was one of the 5 directors. We had Ken Bates, who was the Chelsea chairman, as our chairman, and he was in charge. And he was a tough guy. And irrespective of what my views are about Ken, he did a great job. One of the things that he did was he came into a meeting one day and he said, we are not having a running track around Wembley. Even though everybody, all the politicians, all the government, they're trying to force us to put a running track around Wembley. I'm going to build the best football stadium in the world. It doesn't have a running track. But Ken was really tough in many areas. And I was probably a little bit too soft for life in London. Let me explain. My view, I'm called what they call an obsessive leader. I don't know what you're like, Josh, but I believe in we all pat each other on the back. We all have a good time. We all get to know each other and try to help each other along. There are some narcissistic leaders who don't give a monkey about anybody apart from themselves. And unfortunately, they are often the most successful ones. And I thought, as the project, when I got there, it was a £440 million project, and it ended up a best part of £800 million project. So there's obviously some problems there. And I was commercial director, and obviously the commercial income had to increase and things had to change. So after a couple of years, I did what I'd done on a couple of occasions. I thought, this is not for me. I have to say, I was missing my wife and I was missing my family 200 miles away. I was flying home every Friday night and flying back every Monday morning. So after a few years, I thought, this is not for me. I'm putting my resignation in. The moment I thought that, I did it. So that was after. I'm very supportive. The finance director, Roger Maslin, is still a great friend of mine. I've still got my friends down there, but other people came in to move the project forward, and maybe my teamwork philosophy didn't quite work at Wembley. Maybe I was a square peg in a round hole. Never bothered me. I was great to have the job, great to be part of it, great to change some of the designs that I did. I had an influence on some of the designs, but whether I enjoyed the cutthroat employment ways that happened down in London, maybe not for me, but that's life.
Yeah, I mean, different environments for
totally
everyone. Can you, I mean, you've been to countless stadiums around the world, and you kind of look at it in a different way than most people do. Is there anything that you've noticed in different stadiums that's been really progressive, or that have been like shocked? You've been like, wow, I wish I had thought of that, or like anything really progressive?
One thing that has crept in that's massively, and I'm still very close to my old Burnley teammates. In fact, 5 of them came round to my house last night for dinner. So that's how close I am with my Burnley teammates from 40 years ago.
Wow.
And if there's one thing we're very envious about, it's the pitch. The pitches we played on, but by the time you got a month into the season, they were all churned up, and all the grass had gone, and they were, now you have wonderful Deso. Have you heard of Deso?
Yeah, I read.
Yeah.
So Dave, who put me in contact with
yeah.
you, he just did a book about the groundsman at Burnley. Back in the day, Roy Oldfield, and I read that book, and it was all about how he's like he's just like can't believe these Deso pitches and how how incredible they are.
Yes, it's fascinating. Basically you stitch plastic into the grass once it's seeded and the grasses start to grow, and so consequently we got the best pitches in the world because we got a nice temperate climate over here in England. We get green grass, and that's what is needed for beaming this Premiership all around the world. So that is one thing that I'm envious of. Me and my colleagues are also envious of the ball. It's a different ball that players play with. The boots are different. So you got the pitch different, the boots, the training regimes. Let me tell you one simple thing about the training or the philosophies in my era. On the way to if we had a big match at Everton, when I played for Burnley, on the way there, we'd stop for a meal and they'd feed us steaks because... Oh, get a big steak down here, so we'd all have a big fillet steak to beef us up, to strengthen us up for the game. Probably the worst thing you could possibly eat. You're probably better eating a cold tin of beans than you were eating But in those days, they thought that let's do it right. We'll give all the lads a big steak before the match. So many things have changed. What my era not too jealous about is the money. We see the multi-millionaire players now, and good luck to them. We were really well paid. We think we played in a better era. It was far more competitive. You had to really know how to look after yourself on the pitch. And we think the teamwork and another thing is in the dressing room. When I first went to Bolton Wanderers, every single player in the dressing room was from Bolton. I went back there as chief executive 30 years later. There wasn't one person in the dressing room who was from England. So that's how quickly things change. But obviously, the laughs and the camaraderie and the good fun was a lot easier in our day because we were all English and we all spoke English and we all had the same sense of humour. And now the dressing room often has a lot of people from different countries who can't speak English. So how can you have a laugh and a joke? It's much more difficult these days because things have changed, and that's how it is. So we think our era was the best, and we wouldn't, for all the money, wouldn't change.
Yeah.
That's our belief. I'm sorry, just answer the question that you did ask me. What is the thing? The great thing about our stadiums now is they're safe. They are safe stadiums. When the fire was at Bradford City in 1985, 56 people lost their lives a game of football. Hillsborough, 1989, 96 people lost their lives. And these were because stadiums were designed to get people in, not to get people out. Now we're designing the stadiums. If there's an emergency, everybody evacuates and we're out within minutes. So that is significantly important for me, because I look at the old Bradford City stadium, and my wife and my kids used to sit in that stand watching me play. And it was just good fortune or a serendipity that they weren't there that day when the fire went up.
Yeah, well, it was all wooden stands, and I know it was outlawed after that, of course. I want to get back. We started talking originally about your public speaking, and the after dinner speeches that you'd been given for, as you said, 30 plus years. What is it about public speaking that you enjoy so much?
Oh boy. Obviously, it allows you to earn a good income at a time when you can have a job through the day, and then there is an income to be earned of an evening. And in the good old days, because the dinners were so popular over here, sometimes I would go out maybe 4-5 nights a week on a regular basis, so many hundreds of dinners. So it was an additional income stream that after my football career, as I was finding my way into the stadium business, that helped my wife and my family get the things in life that we needed. So it was a good way to supplement it. I loved working with the comedians, some of these characters, and the people that I met on the circuits. And often you would be sat next to the chairman of the clubs, who were normally real characters, so you got to know the chairman of cricket clubs and golf clubs and rugby clubs and all the way around the country. And I just found the camaraderie of it was great fun.
Yeah, like being back with the team.
Yeah, and often the comedians would help you. They say, look, when you use that little line, why don't you add to it? I remember one comedian said to me, why do you say about that goalkeeper? He had a false leg and a real foot. He said, yeah, it's a really good line. He said, and all you need to say is, and we once had a goalkeeper and he had a false leg and a real foot. And every people start to, what's all that? But, so they add, they say, and use this line here and take a breath there. And so it's almost like a little team game on that top table where you help the other speaker and the comedians help you and you help them. So, yeah, I had great fun. I must have done way over 1,000 dinners all around the country. I've spoke to all females where it's been the ladies association, and so that tests you, and so it's all, and then of course where it helps you is when you're in the board meeting, you have to give a board report. You're a little bit more confident into giving the board report to the board of directors because your public speaking has been helped a little bit.
I also read that you played the ukulele as part of. I mean, I'm just curious. Like, what is your angle for your speech if you're including football and a ukulele? Like,
well,
what's the content of your speech?
No, well, this is stupid. A good friend of mine is a guy called Steve Kinton, who's a top after dinner speaker. And a few years ago, he said to me, you and I, Fletch, me and you were going up to do a big speech up in Glasgow. He said, and I've told them that you do this and you play the ukulele. So I've told them that me and you will have a sing-song at the end of the speech and you play the ukulele. I said, no. I play the uke at home. I enjoy playing it. I don't have a singing voice, even though I can get a few songs out of it. I used to take the uke on tour with us because when we were away, sometimes we could all have a sing. I'm a great singer in an audience when we can all have a sing-along, but as a solo. So anyway, he said, well, we've got to do it. So we pieced something together and we did it. In fact, one agent booked us for 15 dinners on the trot, 15 days on the trot. apart from Sunday. So we did a Saturday, then we did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, and we did 15 on the trot. And we took amplification with us because we had all the music and all. So it's something that we did. It was, once again, I think everybody, Josh, we've got to keep challenging ourselves. How can we do that and not be scared if something doesn't work? Something that doesn't, okay, we give it a try, it doesn't work, give it a try, try all these different things. So we don't do it now, but we probably did it for about 2-3 years, where we took the uke along and had a good sing-song at the end of a dinner. It was good fun.
That's incredible. I mean, I can't even imagine like, getting up in front of like an audience if like I had to sing, if I wasn't like an actual
and if you
singer.
don't have a voice, if you're not an actual, imagine doing that. So there's ways to do it, but we did it and it did work, and we did get lots of bookings with it, and it was good fun. But we've probably moved on.
I had a chuckle when I was reading your book, your autobiography, and you mentioned your love for the Al Pacino speech. God, I'm totally blanking on the movie, but the football movie. My God, because it's probably my favorite speech in any movie. It's right up there.
Well, I've sort of, I've not copied it word for word, but I've written a novel called Bloody Saturday with Alistair Campbell that comes out next February 2018, and. There is a manager who does give a speech to his team in the book, and obviously I've thought about what the way Al Pacino delivered that speech, which was incredible, wasn't it? Yeah, how he inspired, and people, and sometimes somebody standing up can inspire. How fascinating is that? One of my heroes is Winston Churchill, who would go on the radio, on the television, and he would inspire millions of people just by the words he used and the way that he spoke, and it's just a fascinating way of communication.
Yeah, and I'll post on the show notes. I'll post a YouTube link to that. I love the 1 inch like
just grow by 1 inch every day.
But speaking of the book you're doing with Alistair Campbell, what inspired you to write that book? Because when it's not just, it's a novel. It's it's a straight up fiction. So what, like, it doesn't, I looked at your bio and there's nothing to suggest that obviously you wrote a stadium book and your autobiography, but nothing fiction, unless I might have missed something. But why did you decide to write a novel?
Yeah, Josh, I'm constantly challenging myself. The reason I wanted to write a novel is because I'd never written one. I didn't know what it would be like to try and write a novel. And it's only once you've completed it that you know what it's like to write a novel. I remember when I did the Stadium book, I don't know if I mentioned this in the book, but I met a guy called Peter Thompson, who's a motivational speaker himself, and I was having lunch with him, and he turned to me and he said, "So what do you specialise in?" And I took that as a real insult. I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Well, what do you specialise in?" So I said, "Well, you know what, I build stadiums. You've known that, Peter. I've been doing it for..." I said, "I specialise in building stadiums." He said, "No, you don't." And the room was quiet, and I thought, I said, "Well, why is that?" So he said, "Nobody specialises in anything until they've written a book about it." So what he was doing, he was challenging me. So obviously, as I drove home that night, I thought, he's right. I'm not a specialist in stadiums. I'll write a book about it, and now I'm a specialist in building stadiums. And he was exactly right. And that book has gone around the world, and I sell, I don't know, various copies each week, and for everywhere. And I am a specialist in stadiums because I wrote a book about it. So I challenged myself. I was one day on holiday, sat with my wife, and we were talking about things. We were talking about some stories, and my wife said, "Oh, you should turn that into a book." Bong! Immediately. I'd never written a novel. Let's give it a try. But I was clever. I think I was clever enough to realise if I put my name on a novel, I'll sell 10 copies. I persuaded Alistair Campbell to co-write it with me. And obviously he's written and sold hundreds of thousands of books around the world by having his name, because he's a massive football fan and he's a great person. irrespective of his politics, put all that to one side, he's a lovely, lovely person, and we get on great together. Massive football fan, so we wrote the book together, and it was called, the book was called Saturday, and it's about 1974, when the IRA were having a bombing campaign in London, and at the same time football clubs like my club Burnley had to go down and play football in London while all this bombing was going on. So it's a combination of politics and bombings and IRA and football. So he wrote part of it and I wrote part of it, and it's come together really well. We have a publisher and it comes out next year.
What would you tell professional footballers today who are, the average football career is something, I want to say like 6 years or 7 years, I forget the number, but what would you say to footballers who are entering their post football life? You've done it really well, so what would you tell them?
That's a tough question, because each one will be different. Each one will have their own genes that are driving them to... You see, one of the problems that you have as a professional footballer, this is what I would say. So I thought, look, to get where you've got today as a professional footballer in 2017, whether you be in the First Division or the Premiership, to get there's probably 2 million people behind you trying to get your job. And now you're the one who's got it. So you're the professional footballer and you're the one playing for Man United. Now the problem that you'll have is, to get there, you've got this gene in your body that's called the winning gene. And you've won. You've got there. You've driven yourself forward, whether it's been through dedication or looking after yourself or skill or ability. You've got this winning gene, and it's driven you there. And probably, if you're lucky, you'll last 7, 8, 9, 10 years as a professional player. Let me give you a warning. When you retire, you've still got that winning gene in your body, and it still wants you to win. But now you can't run, now you can't compete, but you still want to win. So how are you going to win? How are you going to fulfill this winning gene that you've got in your body when your body has passed it? That is the problem. Now, it's all right saying I've got 10 million in the bank. That's no good. 10 million in the bank is only okay to fulfill your buying things, or if you want a big house and a big car and a helicopter, that's all right, fine, but you've still not fulfilled your winning gene. How are you going to do that? Because that's driven you to get what you are. Now, sometimes you can go, if you do what I did, I can fulfill my winning gene by building stadiums. And the great thrill it is to put on a big rock concert and meet Bryan Adams and bring in the Eagles and all these fabulous shows. I fulfill my gene, and I'm constantly trying to do it. So that is the warning that I've got. It's okay wanting to retire from football, as I say, with many, many millions in the bank. But all that does is it allows you to play golf every day, which gets quite boring. You've got to fulfill that gene, and that's what you should be looking to do.
So, but how do you plan for fulfilling that gene?
Number one, you find out what excites you. What excites you, right? What excited me, sometimes it's serendipitous. You bump into what excited me was stadiums. So imagine starting off with nothing and then building a 40, 50 million pound stadium. Watch it going up, seeing people use it, watching the community develop around it, watching all the shops around and grow and the whole area get better. That is fabulous. That's fulfilling my winning gene, and that helps me to win, because in many places they don't do these things and they can't build them together. So whether you want to be a butcher or, often you'd say to a professional footballer, after your career, do you want to be a butcher? No, not at all. But certainly sitting at home watching Jeremy Kyle on television or playing golf every day is not the answer. You have to find something, and whatever it is in your makeup, to fulfill that winning gene.
When I read your book, the best thing that I read in your book, you told the story of this mysterious woman that advised you on a gift suggestion, and it's actually the greatest gift idea I've ever heard, and when I read it, I was like, I really want to do that. So I felt it was only right that I ask you to retell that story, because there might be some other people at some point later in life that need a gift idea, and I haven't heard a better one than the one that you relate in your book.
Neither did I at the time. Well, what it was, it's quite a while ago now, and I was thinking about this all the other week, and this was for my daughter, and it must have been her, I don't know, 21st birthday. No, it can't have been a 21st. Let's say it was a 23rd birthday. And I'm in London, and my wife has said, pick something up for Claire's birthday before you come home. So your natural thoughts is you'd go to a jewellery shop and throw some money at it and buy her a watch or a bracelet or earrings or something like that. So I knew I had to put some money towards it. So I got into London on my way to, I think it was, I don't know if I was coming home on the train or the plane, but I was in London and I just couldn't see anything. And suddenly it started pouring down with rain. So I'm in the middle of London, pouring down, looking at my watch. I've only got an hour to kill, and I've got an hour to find something. So your natural thoughts is just go and buy something, buy an expensive watch or whatever. So just as I'm looking in this jewellery shop, this little old lady came by, and she said, and we're both sheltering from the rain, and she had this very strange plastic hat on her. I think I remember she had a yellow coat. So, she looked strange, but she was a lovely old lady. So she said, what are you looking for? So I said, I'm just looking for a present for my daughter for her birthday. And she said, would you like to give her the greatest gift? Sorry? She said, would you like to give her the greatest gift? Things start getting a little bit eerie then. So, sorry, what is that? She said, well, forget about jewellery. Just go across there, go into Woolworths and just buy a jar, just a glass jar. He said, and get a felt tip and then get a piece of paper and stick it on the front. And all you need to do is write on the front, memory jar. And she said, now, when you get home, stick the label on the front of the jar, and then I want you to get lots of pieces of paper, and you must write down every one of the memories you've had with your daughter. Talk about powerful stuff. How can you not do that? And I was thinking about it all the way home, and it was really hard to do, strangely enough, because when I started it, I might have told the story wrong at the beginning. I think I had a week. It was a week or a few days, but I certainly had time to write these memories. And then you said, you remember when we did that? Remember when we did? And suddenly you start to remember the life that you've had together and how important it is and how quickly it passes. And then you start to remember that you've forgotten a lot of things. So I got all the old picture albums out, and do you remember when we went on to Spain? Remember when you got your first pony? Remember when you got this? And got all these memories together. And it was hard to fill that jar, but I did. And then when it was the night of my daughter's birthday, when she was coming over to see us, for her to give her the present, I booked a table for 3 at a little restaurant in Rottenstall where we live. I dropped them off outside and I didn't go in, and I just left them, and then one of the waiters delivered this to the table. So that night my daughter and my wife just went through all the memories that were in the memory jar. I get a bit emotional when I tell this, but my daughter finally, when she got back, she said, Dad, she said, thanks for the birthday, that's the best gift I've ever had. There you go. Memory jar.
Like when I read it, it sounded incredible, and just hearing it sounds even.
Yeah, and it's so simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
But life passes quickly. We forget a lot of things. If the most important things in life are our children or our parents or whatever, it's nice to relive them and talk about them. And sometimes, as I say, it goes past quickly and you forget all about it. But the memory jar was something that was very significant. And to this day, it's still on my daughter's dressing table.
I mean, I need to do this. I
challenge everybody to do. Yeah. Everybody who listens to this has a loved one If you want to give that loved one a great gift, give them a memory jar.
Yeah, you could throw in a couple pictures too. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same way every.
No, you that memory jar is your own memory jar. If you want to cut pictures out and say, "Do you remember when we did this? Do you remember when this happened?" and you put the picture there, it makes it even more easy to remember. So yeah, put pictures in, make it your own, but just make it so simple about the memories. And do you know how much it'll cost? It'll cost you about £2. And to spend £2 and for somebody to say this is the greatest gift I've ever had, strange. Yeah.
So, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, and by whom?
I think it was probably via Dale Carnegie, because I became a great follower of Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, which was voted the book of the millennium. That's the best book in 100 years. So if anybody's listening to this podcast, I will just challenge you. Do you not think you should read what's voted the best book in 100 years? Because it's mind-blowing. And as I was reading through Dale Carnegie, when I went on the Dale Carnegie course, and one of the tests is get out of your comfort zone. As a professional footballer, I lived in a comfort zone. I lived in a very comfortable, nice big 4-bedroom house, nice brand new car outside. And then I realised I was going to fall off the edge of a cliff because my career was going to come to an end at some stage. And I realised unless I get out of this comfort zone of everybody being nice to you and giving you this and gifts arriving, blah, blah, blah. I had to get away from all that, and I had to really go start at the bottom and work my way up from the top. So, that is significant for me.
What's something that most people think is true, but you don't think is true?
People think life is a very long thing, and it isn't. It absolutely flies by. And once you get past maybe 40, 45, 50, then it goes 3 times faster. So don't think, they say the longest life is a very short time, and it is. So if life is a short thing, then I encourage everyone, try everything. Go to as many different countries as you can. Speak to lots of different people. Try to write an autobiography. Try to write a novel. Try to specialise in something. Find out what your winning gene is. Do all these things and just constantly keep challenging yourself to be better and better and better. Be compassionate and lots of things like this. That's my values. So.
You mentioned after dinner we talked at length about after dinner speaking. If you could only have dinner with 3 people, and we're taking family out of this because I think that's a given.
Yeah.
If you could only have dinner with 3 people, who would they be?
Number one would have to be Winston Churchill, because we wouldn't be here today. There's no doubt about that. England, this wonderful country, which I think is the greatest country on earth. I would say that, wouldn't I? But we live in a safe environment, and it was all down to Winston Churchill. And people don't realise how significant position he played. The second person I'd have is Alistair Campbell. I like Alistair very much. He has a wonderful sense of humour. I take the mickey out of him. He takes the mickey out of me. We have a great relationship. We've written this book together, and obviously he played a significant part in British politics, so he's played his part. He has his demons. He has a bit of a history of problems he's had in his past life, and he's overcome them. So he's and then who would be my third one sat around that table? It would have to be one of the Beatles. I would struggle because me and my wife are massive Beatles fans. In fact, we're taking all our family for the 3rd time to Las Vegas to see the Beatles show, the Love show. Have you heard about that?
No.
You've not heard about that?
No.
George Martin, before he died, wrote with his son, did this album called the Love Album. It's been at Las Vegas for the last, must be 10 years. And it is the greatest show on earth, without any shadow of a doubt. And and obviously the Beatles were our era. Me and my wife saw the Beatles live. I didn't. She was 13. So one of the Beatles, now there's only two still alive, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. So probably I'd go for a guitar player. So it'd probably be Paul McCartney. And just to say thank you for the incredible music that they put together over a 15 year period that played a significant part in my life. And it was the time that I was courting. And I tried to say this to my grandson now, Morgan. At that time, you wanted to listen to records that I saw her standing there, and What Happened the Night Before, and Yesterday, and all these Beatles songs were all about boy meets girl, boy breaks up with girl, girl meets another boy, all these things. These are all the Beatles songs. So it would have to be a Beatles. So it will be those three. It will be Alistair, it'll be Paul McCartney, and it'll be Winston Churchill.
Hell of a threesome. Or foursome.
Guess no better, yeah. Guess no better.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I have no interest whatsoever in a legacy for myself. I just want to pass things down in my genes. That's the only thing you can pass down. If you think about it, it's all right building a statue. The statue will be down in 100 years, it'll crumble away. But just supposing in 100 years' time or 200 years' time, one of my descendants has a trait that was passed down the line by me. Just supposing I've got a trait. Like what I try to be a really happy, fun-loving person. Try to be sort of honourable and funny and all these things. So that is sort of me. Just supposing in 200 years' time there's a young kid walking about in Bolton and he's doing that just because that's how I develop that's what I think you can pass down. And I don't believe you can pass anything else. Money is of no consequence. Passing money down, inherited wealth is of no consequence. Nothing is of any consequence apart from what you can pass down in that little gene. And we all have little idiosyncrasies. I have a little twitch of my neck, so I'm told. How about if in 300 years there is a great one, and he's got a little twitch of his neck, and it's all back to. So this is the only thing we can
maybe
really.
You have one because of your
great
mother.
We all have some, don't we?
Yeah.
We all have features that have been passed down generations, but now I'm talking about traits or things that we do or with things that we've learned to do that can be passed down. Rather than so, that's the only legacy. Burnley Football Club, my old club. When a player dies, the coffin drives past the football club and everybody comes out. But I don't want any of that. That would be embarrassing. I want no recognition of me being a footballer at all. It was wonderful at the time. That's all gone. It's all past. So it's just living for this particular moment that matters. Whatever happened in the past is insignificant.
Do you have any requests for the crowd, or is there any way that they can reach you, or do you have anything you'd like to ask of them?
Of which crowd?
The people listening. I mean, like, you would say, like, is there anything you want them to do, or?
Yeah, I would encourage people to get out of the comfort zone, because it's significant once you do that. Every one of us has a little sphere where we're quite comfortable within, and let me ask the crowd, where do opportunities lie? Are they going to be inside that little sphere of your comfort, or are they going to be outside? Break outside and have a little see, because once you do break outside, your whole comfort zone gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So so that is a challenge. Number one, as that American speaker once said. The most important thing in life, number one, who are you going to live your life with? Choose carefully. And I say choose carefully to young people. When you're 17, 18, 19, 20, is this girl that you're taking out tonight, is this boy who you've met, are they the one you want to spend the rest of your life with? Choose very, very carefully. Don't just rush into things. So, you know, that is a good lesson in itself. And, you know, for me, drifting, how come I drifted into football stadiums? And now, instead of building little stadiums in Bolton, I'm working in Ahmedabad and Doha and all over the show. How good fun is that? And it's just so simple once you piece it together.
And how can fans or people reach you or get into contact with you if they want to?
Email address. Right. Please email me, and I'll be pleased to be of any help I can, because you know we always pass on this knowledge to each other in a teamwork environment. The Dale Carnegie essence of teamwork is you can get anything you want in life by helping other people get what they want.
Well, I'll put your website with your email address in the show notes on the internet. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. It's been an absolute joy listening to your words of wisdom and some old tales as well.
Well, let's hope this can be passed down, and let's hope people, you know, if one person listening to this says to themselves, I'm going to write that book, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to do that, it's been worthwhile, because that's all we can do, pass on little ideas to each other and inspire people. I was inspired by watching a young kid jump up and down and head a ball, and that gave me a career that lasted 16 years. So we need to be inspired. So if I've inspired anybody listening to this, get out there, pick that pen up and start to write that book.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to it on iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Acast, or any podcasting catching app. Want to learn more about the guests and go behind the scenes? Then go to my website, www.footballautobiographyshow.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. Also, if you like the show, or even if you hated it, leave a comment on either my Twitter page at Football Autobio or my Facebook page, The Football Autobiography Show. I welcome and would appreciate any feedback from you all. Thanks for listening. Take care.